For folks who are just joining us, welcome. We are going to give people a few minutes to arrive, and we will be starting at 6:35. Okay, well, it's 6:35. Let's
All
get
right.
started.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you may notice that you're currently muted, and everybody is going to stay muted throughout the duration of the meeting, except for our co-chairs, Adam and Elizabeth. You can participate as we move through the agenda by going to the React icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down, and it's not the wave or the thumbs up; those will disappear. As we move through the agenda, Adam and Elizabeth will call on folks who raise their hand. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute whenever you're called on. And then be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support to help with the Zoom software. It's not to ask questions of the co-chairs or other participants. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you might need to go to the participants section where you'd find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your hand or wave at the screen to get our attention. There's a lot of folks here and we might not be able to see you. So if you're having problems, just chat me. I'm here for support. And with that, I'll hand it over to Adam and Elizabeth and they can get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Will. Much appreciated. Welcome, everybody. I guess apologies up front that we had no idea when we scheduled this meeting that there would be not one but two New York playoff games happening this evening, so we are especially appreciative of all of you for being here, and we will try to get everybody out in time to watch the Mets. So with that, let's get starting. Will, can you enable me to share my screen, please?
Yeah, you
There
should be able to
we
now.
go. No, this is the wrong one. This should be the right one. Let me go to the top and go on to. Okay, does everybody see today's date on the first page of the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Great. Okay, we're in the right place. So here's our agenda for this evening. We are going to be discussing portions of 3 blocks in our community board area. Block numbers are a New York City specified term, and so these are blocks 1571, which is the mid block from 91st to 92nd Street between First and York Avenues. Block 1557, which is on the mid block from 94th to 95th Street between First and Second Avenues, and then block 1556, which is on 94th Street between First and Second Avenues, and then any old business and any new business. There are a lot of new names attending this evening, which is wonderful. And so I'd like to start with just some context about this task force and what it is, how it was formed, and what we are trying to accomplish with this. What many of us probably never imagined is that there are parts of Community Board 8, and in particular parts of the Upper East Side, that currently continue to be zoned for manufacturing or commercial use only. Meaning, if a property were to be demolished, only commercial or manufacturing uses could be put up on that location. A new residential facility would not be permitted. And it is kind of astonishing to think that in a very residential neighborhood, in a city that is in desperate need of housing, that there would still be locations in our community that would not allow for new residential development. And so, and we've seen the impact of this in some recent construction where, for example, a self-storage facility, a very large self-storage facility, was put up on one of these blocks, on one of these types of sites, that many people on the community board felt that that location really should have been a great location for more residential use for an apartment house. And so the then chair of Community Board 8 authorized the creation of this task force. It had been proposed initially by my co-chair, Adam Wald, to take a specific look at these blocks that are currently, or that can continue and are currently still zoned for manufacturing or commercial use only, in order to develop a proposal to allow for residential use of these blocks and residential development of these blocks. We are not working with any developers. To our knowledge, there have been no developers who have even attended these meetings, but we have been working since December to look at each of these blocks and propose and talk about what might be an appropriate residential zone for these locations. And so that is what we are continuing to do tonight. This page gives you the list of all of the blocks that are under this discussion that continue to be zoned either M14, excuse me, which is manufacturing only, or C84, which is commercial use, And the blocks highlighted in yellow are the ones that we are planning to discuss today. We have previously discussed all of the other blocks in prior meetings. So let's go from there. We also want to remind everybody of what is currently permitted in these areas. So for the blocks that were M14, they could, as of right, build a facility that is what's known as a 2.0 FAR, floor area ratio. You will hear us using that term quite a bit, which means that based on the size of the lot, they can build 2 times that size in terms of floor area, or 6.5 times the size of that lot for the use of a community facility, such as a medical facility or a school. And there are certain use groups that are allowed in these districts, and that gets into a fair amount of technical information from zoning resolutions. But trust me, you can't put a new residential unit in this location. The blocks that are C84, as of right today, they can build 5.0 times the amount of floor area for commercial use, or 6.5 times the amount of floor area for a community facility. And these are mostly the same use groups, just excluding use group 17, which is more manufacturing oriented. So uses here could be commercial offices. It could be a school, which is also allowed in a residential district. It could be life science, self-storage, as I mentioned, manufacturing that meets certain standards, warehouses, auto repairs, parking garage, or by special permit, a hotel. But most importantly, residential use, a new residential use is not permitted. And there is no height limit on any of these blocks. The height is only limited by the amount of floor area that can be built. Some of you, I am sure, are wondering, I imagine that you live on one of these blocks and you're saying, but wait a minute, if residential use is not permitted, how do we live there? And the answer is that residential uses that existed before the zoning regulations were put in place are grandfathered. So they can continue to be used as residential locations, but they can't, new construction could not be made for any residential use. Over the course of the several months that this task force has been working, we've developed a set of guiding hypotheses about what is or might be an appropriate type of zone for these blocks. So these are the hypotheses that we have been working with and that will guide the conversation later in the presentation. So the first is that we would look primarily at zone types with an FAR, floor area ratio, equal to or greater than 6.5. And the reason is that that is what could currently be built on one of these locations for a community facility. Our goal here is to enable residential use, not to reduce the potential density that is currently allowed. So conversion, not down zoning per se. The second is that we want the FAR to be sufficient, high enough to ensure that any redevelopment would qualify for mandatory inclusionary housing requirements, meaning any development that is 25,000 square feet or more under New York City law must include affordable housing, minimum of 20% affordable housing. And so it's not only that we would like to see residential development, but we want to make sure that that residential development includes affordable units and isn't simply the ability to build a large single-family townhouse or luxury-only development. And so the law requires that any development that is over 25,000 square feet must include inclusionary housing, and this is only for development where the city has changed the zone. It doesn't apply to already existing residential zones. It only applies if there has been a rezoning or a change in the zone. At that point, any development over 25,000 square feet must include affordable housing, and any development between 12,500 square feet and 25,000 square feet could contribute to a fund for affordable housing. It's not as good from our perspective. So most importantly, we don't want to encourage development that would be smaller and therefore would not require include affordable housing. We certainly don't want to see a brand new luxury single family townhouse. That said, we don't want to, this is now I'm on the third hypothesis. We don't want to increase the FAR so much that owners would be strongly incentivized to demolish what may currently be there and redevelop. So we want to make sure that we don't over incentivize redevelopment, and that's, we want enough incentive to redevelopment, but not too much. So it's a little bit of a thin line that a fine line we are trying to walk. The fourth is that we are looking at what are called contextual zone types. Contextual zones have height limits. Zones that are not considered a contextual zone do not have a height limit. And this is really the only way that we can create some height limits in the case of a rezoning like this. We would like, I'm now on the avenue zones. Avenue zones, there are a couple of these locations where it's not the mid-block, but it's actually right on the avenue that we are looking at. And so there we would want to mirror the adjacent or opposite block zone types to create consistency. And in fact, in general, we have been looking at these on a block by block basis to try to make block by block proposals that are consistent with the surrounding area. And finally, we would, of course, grandfather existing uses, consistent with rezoning of other manufacturing districts. We would imagine that this will continue to be a mixed use area. All right, let's see if I can get to the next page. Here we go. So I am now going to turn this over to my co-chair, Adam Wald, and he will start talking through the individual blocks that we are looking at. We'll look at existing conditions, we'll look at lots of photographs, and we will then have a discussion of a proposed zone type. Adam?
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Yes, Elizabeth?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So these blocks that we're going to address this evening, these were the original impetus for this whole effort. And going back, I don't know, 2 years or so, we originally were looking at these specific blocks. We eventually expanded it to all C8-4 and M14 lots in the Upper East Side, but is this little corner of the neighborhood that we really were focused on because of the interesting land uses that are in the neighborhood in these blocks. So in these blocks, we have self-storage, we have overbuilt schools in the mid block, we have life science developments that are being planned and they're on their way at the moment. And we have underutilized garages in the mid block as well. So these are really the interesting land use types that we're looking to not discourage, but replace with residential use. So we're starting on the first block is the northerly side of East 91st Street on block 1571. And we have 5 parcels that we're looking at today in this block. We're currently zoned C8-4. And so let's, I guess, go to the next slide and we can show some images of what's on the block today. So we have a commercial building at 403 East 91st Street. That's offices. That's a 4-story building. And next to it is we have a cooperative apartment building at 407 East 91st Street. And that's a 5-story and penthouse building, approximately 55 feet in height. Next slide. And continuing along the block, we have the ASPCA building, which is sandwiched in between the new community facility development that's ongoing at 419 East 91st Street. And further along the block, we have the NYC Elite Gym building at 421 East 91st Street. So it's a 1+ story building, approximately 30 feet in height. So these are all an interesting mix of uses on one block: community facility, quasi retail, office, all on this block. Let's see so let's go to the next slide. So this is the context of what's really going on this block. And we talked about this last meeting, this R8 zone that's sandwiched in the mid block that also impacted other blocks that we were talking about. So we have this R8 that takes up a portion of the block. And then we also have, and that the entire block is sandwiched by C28 and R10 equivalents on the avenues. But in the middle, we have this R8, and we have our existing C84 zoning district. So it's really interesting to see all 4 zones along one block. And the idea of looking at blocks like this is to bring some context so that we can have a more uniform land use, and of course to provide for more residential development. So the next slide. So our proposal for this block is to rezone it for an R8A equivalent, which would be up to 7.2 FAR with 145-foot height limit. It is currently opposite a proposed R8 zoning district, R8A, which is now C84, but we're proposing to rezone it to R8A. And it's abutting the aforementioned R8 district. And it's on a block improved with a mix of developments that range all the way up to 152 feet. And we do note that on this block, unlike with other blocks that we're looking at, there are some very clear potential development sites on this block that we all want to pay attention to, and we all want to encourage some residential development to occur on these parcels. Next slide. So continuing along this same block, but just going north, it's the southerly side of East 92nd Street. And there's really 3 parcels that are mapped in the C84 that we're looking at: 408, 424, and 428 East 92nd Street.
Next and we think 408 is actually 410.
You're right,
so
right. 408 is the corner. It should be labeled 410. 408 is the corner building, the corner apartment building. So yeah, next slide, we can show what these look like. Yeah, so we have 410, which is an elevator hotel and with community facility components. And next to it, going east, is the animal hospital. And then further east is one of the aforementioned self-storage developments that exist. And on the next slide, we can show some of the neighborhood context. So again, this abuts we're going to show it abuts the R8 to the east, but then also is flanked by the C28 R10 to the west. And next slide. So opposite is the NYCHA campus, and the buildings immediately opposite these parcels we're looking at are improved with 2 25-story buildings. And immediately abutting this to the west is a 32-story building at 408 East 92nd Street. So when we're looking at the development context for this portion of the block, we're really informed by what's going on or what exists across the street and next to us. And these are, larger buildings, larger developments of, between 250 and 350 feet. So next slide. So that's what kind of guided us to look at an R10A zone for this portion of the block. Again, we're abutting an R8, but that R8 also doesn't have a height cap. It's a height factor zone, and it is opposite a 32, or sorry, opposite 25-story and abuts a 32-story building. And assemblage would be encouraged to promote MIH. That said, it's unlikely there's going to be real development on this portion of the block, but were there to be development, we would like to see larger density residential projects. So next slide. Okay, so now we're at the northerly side of East 94th Street between 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue. This is an interesting block because this is where we already have started to see the development of a life science project that takes up a big chunk of this. And the rest of the block is improved with residential that, you know, we would not target for development at the moment. Again, the life science project is ongoing and there's nothing really we can do to stop it to encourage residential development. But it's projects like this we were trying to target for residential development. So that would be lot 8. So next slide, we'll look at what's really here. So what they've done is they've left the existing portion of 303 East 94th Street, and they've torn down the piece next to it, and they're going to combine it for a 190-foot tall life science development. So you can see that on the picture on the left. And then on the right, you can see the piece they've torn down and where they're gonna have a new build. And then of course, further to the right, you see the existing developments on 329 to 337 East 94th Street. Now, when we were doing research for this, I noticed that there was a partial vacate that exists on these lots at 329 to 337 East 94th Street. I need to do a little bit more investigation on these lots unless there are folks here who are informed, but we're going to look into that more. Next slide. So this is some neighborhood context of what exists. So just across 94th Street, we have a mid-block office building. But what's interesting is it also backs up to the overbuilt community facility development that is 204 feet tall in the mid-block. So these are interesting. These are the interesting land use types that we are investigating throughout this little corner of the neighborhood. You know, office buildings, overbuilt school buildings, self-storage, life science developments, et cetera, et cetera. So next slide. So this is a zoning diagram and a map of what the life science development is going to look like. The shaded gray in the image on the left is what they're retaining, and everything in white is new development. And you can look at this and you say, oh, it's only a 9-story building. But when you look a little harder, you see that, oh, it's 48 feet for the first 3 stories, and then 64 feet for the next 4 stories, and then 81 feet for the next. So when you add it all up, it gets to be over 190 feet for a mid-block life science development. Of course, we would love to see 190-foot residential development here, but that's not happening. So this is, yeah, so this is what informed us to consider, again, a higher density R10A for this portion of the block, because we are considering what's going on in the neighborhood and what exists in the neighborhood. And this 205-foot tall, or 204-foot tall, that's a typo, community facility, school use, that backs up to this portion of the block. And then, of course, the 190-foot tall life science building that is currently under development. And I guess next slide. Yeah, so this is the northerly half of the block, fronts along the southerly side of East 95th Street. So along this portion, we have the aforementioned 204-foot tall community facility building. We also have a portion of the life science development, which extends out to East 95th Street, and then a number of other small land use, smaller uses, including several residential uses. So on the next page, we'll see what we have going on. On the left, we have 328 to 338 East 95th Street, 3 to 6 story residential buildings. And then further to just next to that is the partially demolished piece of the life science development at 309 East 94th Street. Next to that, we have the 3-story commercial building at 320 East 95th Street, which you can see in the foreground of the center picture. And then just beyond that is 312 East 95th Street, the 204-foot tall community facility building. And we're finishing up at 308. Oh, sorry, I was going to describe what was going on at 308 East 95th Street. It is a 2-story commercial building, parking garage, which is connected to a 5-story portion that fronts along 2nd Avenue. So that's an interesting, again, another interesting land use and development opportunity. So next slide. So again, we looked at this as an R10A. The R10A would match the R10A we're proposing for the southerly portion of the block, and again, would be in context with some of the large developments that exist on East 95th Street and that are proposed for what's going to be on East 94th Street through to East 95th Street. And then the last block we're looking at this evening is part of block 1556, which is the southerly side of East 94th Street. There are a number of small parcels on this block, most of which contain residential uses. There are a few non-residential uses, as we'll see when we look at some of the images on the block. The next slide. So we do have some non-residential uses at 304 East 94th Street. It's a 2-story commercial building around 28 feet in height. Next to it is a residential building at 308, 310 East 94th Street. We also have mid-block office buildings on this block, and then we have a number of other smaller 5-story residential buildings taking up the balance of the block. So we felt that this was a zone that would, an area that would take a lower zone of R8A, and it would have a height limit of 145 feet. And this would encourage development that's more in context with what exists on the block. And again, we acknowledge that there are not many non-residential development parcels on this block, but there are a few that require some investigation. And then next slide. Oh, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, we want to take any questions or comments, and then eventually we'll go through and take a straw poll of people's take of each of the blocks. But for now, I think we'll open it up to questions and comments.
And we will go to members of the public first. So Diego Barberena.
Hi, how are you? So I live in one of these blocks, 95th Street, 2nd Avenue, next to that parking space, the parking that you showed. If you go to the slide, it shows also an abandoned building, which is been very problematic. That building has been abandoned for more than 20 years. And in this area, we have a lot of abandoned buildings. So you said that even the parking garage connects to another building in 2nd Avenue. The parking is only using the ground floor as an entrance. You see that building that is board?
Let me know which is this one on the right, that the abandoned building you're talking about?
Yeah, I have been living here for 20 years. Actually, the farther brick that you see on the right, that's my building. And that building has been abandoned for 20 years. It has scaffolding on and off. It has scaffolding in the back, which actually it's against our windows, so it gives us no light and air. There's another building next to the subway entrance that burned a little bit, enough to clear the building, which is also abandoned. And on 96th Street on 2nd Avenue, there's another pretty big abandoned building that had structural damage. I think it was caused by the 2nd Avenue subway. So all these zoning things is great, but I think we should also tackle all these abandoned buildings that are just standing there. And my take also is that the city of yes is creating a problem. Instead of incentive for people to develop, it's an incentive for people to wait for this city of yes to pass, like, I don't know, in 2 or 3 years or whenever it's going to happen, so they can build even more. This abandoned building, for what I know, is been is owned by the parking garage. The parking garage has been in contact with our management, previous management, because they want to join us with them so they can take on corner block preferences that they can use and build, have more freedom to build whatever they want to, and maybe cantilever on top of us and stuff like that. Another thing that I want to mention about that overbuilt school is that they built to the back, so there's actually no rear yard between that building, the school, and the life science building. There's only like 15 feet instead of the 16 feet that is usually required in a residential lot. We also have on that street, on the 95th on the north side, which was not seen in the photograph, we have this big high school. It used to be the old Hunter High School. I think now it's called, it used to be called then Life Science High School. And the city has not been a great neighbor either, because they had scaffolding there for a long time. And they have just like a big sidewalk, which they never clean or anything like that. That's all what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm going to get these in the right order because since I'm sharing screen, but let's go with Mr. Dubinsky, Andrew Dubinsky.
Hi, thank you. I've listened to some of the other presentations from the prior blocks, and I happen to live on this block. And I guess what I would just ask is that that we should balance this desire for huge housing supply to take into account the huge impact it's going to have on the people who live there. It's going to have pretty disruptive construction at the heights that you're proposing. And those height limits aren't really a limit if we take into account the what will likely happen with the city of yes, which could allow for bonuses, I think 20% or more. So I just think the proposal that you have really is kind of downplaying the impact it could have over the the next decade. And as you showed, the tallest mid-block building prior to the shelter was 5 stories, and many of the other buildings are much smaller than that and fairly attractive. And I think that you could still allow for a lot of new construction and a lot of new supply, but really balance what the block looks like. We've absorbed the shelter. We have a pretty good idea of what a 7-story or 8-story construction is like, and it's quite disruptive. We don't have a lot of outreach on what the use will be like, so that's not a great experience. We already absorbed the marine transfer facility. We never got the second ramp to improve the safety of our block. And, we have a bus lane and a bike lane that people build their life around. That's probably going to be out of commission for a while because we know that's what happens based on this recent construction. So I would just recommend that we shoot for a lower height that really balances the lives of people who live here, especially given that we use the bus, we use the bike lanes, and these height limits are likely going to be a lot higher than just this baseline, the baseline zoning.
So City of Yes actually does specify the height limit for these types of zones. Adam, do you have the City of Yes height limits handy? They're not much different.
Yeah, so the idea of proposing a 10 FAR is that when you do mandatory inclusionary housing you develop on site, you will eventually get to a 12 FAR, but we will be under the height cap that we're proposing. It would be 235 feet. So it wouldn't achieve a higher density than the 12 FAR or 235 feet for an R10A. That's our goal.
Tom Haney?
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm a resident at 407 East 91st, between First and York. It's the block we just talked about, and I wanted to make a couple of points about this block, and of course that includes the south side, which you've already spoken of. And this may also apply to the block to the north of us on 92nd between First and York. So as far as I know, our block between York and First, I know has commercial parking laws instead of residential parking laws. So we're a no parking during the day, and we never have alternate side parking like every other block that you're talking about in this project. Our block is the bus turnaround block. So every bus that utilizes York Avenue, that cross down at 86, that cross down at 57th, that goes up and down York, they all turn around on 91st Street to 92nd Street, where they park on 92nd Street and wait for their next shift to start. We're also the exit block for the Marine Transfer Station. So all the trucks that come out of there, at least by design, have that same turnaround capacity on our block. But since we're right now commercially zoned and we have mostly commercial businesses on our block, we have commercial garbage pickup, which means they have to hire their own garbage removal that come all throughout the night, every night of the week. It's not like residential garbage pickup. Sorry, my cat just bit me. Nice job, cat. So I just wonder how those living conditions, unless you change them all, and I don't see how we can change the bus routes and the garbage truck routes for that one particular block on both the 91st Street, and I believe it applies to 92nd Street as well. The idea of building 20-story residential buildings and filling that street up with no regular street parking, no alternate side parking, it's just not the same as the other residential blocks that surround us. As soon as you go to First and Second, it's completely different. When you come down 90th, it's completely different. So I just wanted to kind of make that point. It wasn't brought up in any of the discussion, and I think that should be seriously factored in and may be a real damper to the idea of turning this into a residential street like all the other residential blocks.
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's very helpful, and we'll definitely engage with DOT. But my thinking is this is a chicken or the egg thing, right? So it's C8-4 commercial development was put here. As a result, you have what you spoke about. But if it reverts,
well, really, it's always I've lived here since 94. But the building has been here as an apartment since 84. To my knowledge, it's always been zone commercial. Until our building turned into a co-op, we were commercial in 1980. I don't know what the rules were in 1980 that allowed that to happen, but everything else on the block was commercial outside of individual person's residence was 2 houses down. That is now the new facility that Andrew referenced, the previous speaker. But that was a private residence. And how long it's been? That was an old brownstone as well. So you're talking, quite an old structure. Yeah, I don't know, but they've invested a lot of money into the Marine Transfer Facility, and the bus route's the bus route.
Right.
Not a whole lot of alternatives for that. It's in the limited space. So those are going to be factors in. I would have a hard time imagining our building full of 15 and 20-story high-rise apartment buildings. It's like the next block to the west and the other blocks around us. And I get that, but when you walk down those streets, there's a completely different feel. Usually they're lined with cars, except for their few hours on any given day where alternate side parking comes into effect. And if it's not like on 94th Street and 95th Street that you talked about, yes, I mean, it makes sense to put those kind of structures on streets that are primarily residential to begin with. And it is too bad that medical science and storage space has beaten us to it in a couple of spots. But I just think that there's some uniqueness to this block. Now, if you get rid of all the commercial businesses, I guess that would get rid of the commercial garbage pickup. But I don't know what the realities of that is. You probably know who the building owners are and what their businesses are. I don't know when they're gonna sell and make those properties available. But that would be one way to get rid of it, is to get rid of the commercial zoning.
Well, one of the things, Tom, that both you and the prior speaker referenced, and I think it's important to talk about explicitly, is even if these blocks do get rezoned, and that is a long process, with
Right.
which this is a very, very early stage, that does not, in fact, mandate or guarantee any redevelopment.
Right.
All it does is it sets the potential
Right.
that should a property owner decide to develop or close a business or what reconsider the use of the property, that it could become residential.
Right.
And so we genuinely, we don't have control over that. We won't have control over it. All it does is it provides the opportunity that development could be residential rather than commercial.
Right. Yeah, my concern would be, the project that we talked about, that Andrew referenced before. I don't know what its current name is. It's changed a couple times in its development, but
You're referring to the temporary housing.
yes, temporary housing. So the original plan, and again, they've had several plans. They were going to temporarily house 177 people in that 7-story building next to us, which, quadruples the population of people living on this block, because the rest of it is commercial. Had these new zoning laws been in place, I shudder to think how tall and how many people they would have tried to cram in there, because they could. And even though, the unhoused is a serious problem and we all need to contribute to help resolve it, I mean, the developer who made a mint off the city to build that, they don't really care. They just build it as tall and put as many beds as they can and take as much profit as they can. So I shudder to think, with these new zoning laws, when that next window opportunity comes in, I think Andrew Andrew referenced huge change to a block like this, where we're already dealing with commercial night garbage pickup, we're dealing with the constant bus turnaround, we're dealing with the garbage truck exit ramp. So turning it into a residential block, it literally just doesn't really make much sense to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go with
opportunities.
Michelle Birnbaum.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. They're not related to each other, but just curiosities of mine and how it plays into this. The life science building, who is building that? And are we sure it will be completed? Is that a fully funded project? Do you know anything about it?
I believe the project developer is Taconic.
Taconic?
Taconic. Do I know? I don't know the finances behind the project. I believe they went before the city for some sort of tax related application, but I need to confirm that. When I walked by the site, it was obviously it was partially torn down, and they have they're gonna adaptively reuse the existing structure and then build on top. But in terms of their milestones and their schedule, I don't know enough about it. We'll certainly look into that.
Is it an active construction site? And when did it start? In other words, how long has this been going on? Because, some of these projects, if they're underfunded or if they have any problems, they're fits and starts. They start, they build, then they lay around for a couple of years and they start up again.
Yeah, I don't know what when they will be completed or what their target was. It appeared to be active when I walked by, although I did walk by on a weekend. So they may not have been working then.
Oh, you said it appeared to be active, but you didn't see anybody working.
I didn't see anybody
because
there
it was a
I-
weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. The other thing is, when you talk about grandfathering, in certain zoning for use groups, I should say, if let's say there was a barber shop in a location, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but you can continue to put a barber shop in that location as long as one existed there before. And I think there's like a 2-year period. Do you know what I'm referring to, Adam?
That's correct. What you're
Yeah.
saying is correct.
So that's for use groups. Does that law transfer in to the grandfathering that we're talking about when we're talking about actual zoning lots?
You mean with respect to existing residential buildings or?
Yeah, like in other words, let's say we zone this. Let's say we change the zoning on any one of these blocks and they become residential, whichever zone it is. But there's something that exists there now that's commercial or manufacturing. Even though it has been rezoned, does that existing commercial or manufacturing entity have the ability to be replaced by a like manufacturing or commercial entity because that's grandfathered even though the zoning has changed? Am I clear enough?
Yes, no, that's correct. That's correct.
So what is permitted? How does that work?
Well, what's interesting is that, one of the things we talked about for this effort was that we were going to encourage mixed use on certain blocks so that you'd be able to continue to have the option to do, a commercial or manufacturing, but under a residential use. So there would be mixed use developments would be encouraged here. We wouldn't necessarily aim to eliminate the existing uses. We wouldn't tell someone if they have an existing office building, we get rezoned, and then if you don't have tenants, you're going to lose your office. That's not the point of this, and I think we would like to have it structured that way. But your question is, if you have an existing office building, it gets rezoned to residential, can you continue to use it as office? Yes, you can, but you can't have it vacant for 3 or 4 years with no uses and then hope to.
So are there specific parameters there? You said you can't have it vacant. Are there actual parameters written in the zoning laws that guide that? Or is that something we have to create? Or
there are, but that's also something that's being addressed with City of Yes as well. So about making it easier to restart dormant uses. So we're going to see how that comes out in City of Yes and how that applies to what we're doing here as well.
Yes, but we're going to be making our recommendations no matter what the City of Yes says. Am I correct? I mean,
correct. Yeah, I mean, we can structure this how we like and encourage the uses we want as we like. I mean, you look at Gowanus, Gowanus, when they rezone Gowanus, there's not only do they allow existing manufacturing or Gowanus mixed uses, but you get in there, you get extra density bonuses for having those type of uses. I'm not saying that that's something we're going to do here, but that's you can approach it that way as well, which is to encourage the existing use and incentivize the existing use as well. So,
but you're not saying that it would be as of right. That's actually what I'm asking. In the
I
example,
hear what you're asking, Michelle.
You know what I mean?
I think
the barbershop. Is it an as of right thing?
so. I think what we're saying is there is a type of zoning, and Adam can chime in, where you specifically designated as a mixed use zoning, so that it is not, you're not saying that this has to be, new development has to be only residential. New development could include the existing type of use with residential on top. So in that case, if we were to go with that type of zoning, that ground floor could continue to be a barber shop, or it could be a different type of retail. That's a decision that in a recommendation to city planning or in an actual zoning proposal, which we are not there yet, we could choose to either propose it to be, we want this to continue as mixed use, which would continue to allow new commercial use. Or we could say, no, we really want it to be residential use, so that only if you meet the grandfathering clauses can you continue to be commercial or manufacturing.
Okay, so it actually brings me to my next question. So we're talking about R10A in certain circumstances. Now, R10A permits supportive retail at the base. Is that what you are having in mind? And is that what you're referring to as mixed use?
Well, R10A in itself is a residence only district.
But doesn't that, I think it allows for retail, for supportive
You're
retail.
thinking of examples of R10A that are on avenues that have a C1 overlay or a C2 overlay.
Correct.
Yeah,
So,
I guess
Correct.
so.
Right, but
So that is not the case here, is what you're saying? Or it is?
So when
we are not proposing here to build in ground floor retail on the mid-block.
Okay, okay. So R10A would stand, let's say you were proposing that on a certain street, R10A would stand as a residential building. It has a 210 height limit with a 20% bonus for affordable housing, which brings it up to 235. But that would be all residential. Correct? Yeah. And what about R8A? You say that's 145. Are there any zoning categories that are somewhere between R10A and R8A? In terms of height, I should clarify.
Yes, I mean there's R9A, or there's
What is that? What is that entitled?
I have to get the exact height, but then there's also, like what you see on Lexington Avenue, the C1 8X, up to 185 feet. So there are some zoning districts in between. But
Okay.
we looked at it more of as a truly mid-block zoning district versus a truly avenue type or R10A type zoning district. That's how we looked at these blocks.
Oh, well, I was thinking of it just in terms of height.
Right.
In other words, if you wanted to get something between 235 feet and 15 feet, how would the R9A work there?
So hang on one second, Michelle. I'm going to pull up a slide from our February meeting, where we did in fact look at some other zone types. This was the first meeting at which we talked about specific potential zones. And, did they exist already on the Upper East Side? Where might we find them? And so we looked at a range of things. We looked at R8B, which I know you're very familiar with, which is lower density than what can currently be built on these locations. And in the second row here, you will see on the left-hand side is the current height cap, and on the right-hand side is the height cap under City of Yes. So you can see that R10A, the current height cap is 215, and if City of Yes passes, it would become a potential maximum of 235. R9X is 190, which the height under City of Yes is 215. And I apologize for the dog, who is not quite sure what she's asking for. R9A is 165, 185. R8A, 145, 145. So it actually doesn't change under City of Yes. And the same thing for R7X.
Okay, those are all taller. Those all have a higher height limit than with saying R10A or R8A. The smallest one is
No, they have lower.
R8B.
Right.
Well,
If you go from
R8A,
highest, R10A is the highest, then
Right.
R9X, then
Right.
R9A, then R8A and R7X are the same height limit, those slightly different densities. And then R8B is the lowest.
well, R8A
Heights.
is, well, we won't belabor it, but R8A is 145 and R9A is 165,
Yes.
right? Okay. Okay. And my last question, but I just needed some clarification, so I apologize. But my last question is, when you say we are proposing, and you and Adam did a yeoman's amount of work on this, and I really appreciate it because it's like very hard to hang your hat on a lot of this stuff. But when you say we are proposing, is that what you mean? So far, you and Adam are proposing this, and this is what you're bringing to the committee? Is this what you mean?
So, yes, so we as
Okay.
the co-chairs, having done the research on these blocks, we are bringing these proposals to the task force. We, as we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we will at some point this evening go through each one by one and just do a straw poll among the people who are here to get feedback. And then our next meeting in November, we will be summarizing what we have brought to the task force for each of the blocks and have greater discussion and engagement around, do these make sense? Do they make sense on an individual basis? Do they make sense hanging together as a group? Because clearly some of these blocks are near each other and relate to each other. And then hopefully the task force, whether at the November meeting or at the December meeting, will propose a resolution that would have to go to the full board to say, we would like to take the next step, which would be to actually make a proposal, a sort of a high-level proposal to the Department of City Planning and begin a dialogue with them. And then assuming there is some positive interest from the city in actually doing something here, we would then have to develop a formal proposal, which would then have to go through a ULURP process in order to actually get to a rezoning.
I appreciate all that clarification. One last question, because what you said raised it. Will we have to hire a city planner in order to present this, to go to a ULURP process?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll have to talk about funding if that should happen. All right, thanks a million. A lot of hard work. Appreciate the response. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Sebastian?
Thank you, Elizabeth. And of course, thank you both for the presentation. Always appreciated. Also, please do not apologize for bringing your pets to the meeting. I love the dog. I love how we got a cat popping up before. I would love to see more pets in these meetings, just honestly. Oh, 2 dogs. Wow, just keeps getting better. Could we chat a little about block 1571? That was East 91st and East 92nd. Would you mind bringing up the map of that section? So this is the one, just while you're bringing that up, where the notes I took were that the proposal was to rezone the northern side of 91st to R8A and the southern side of 92nd to R10A. You switch over to the map, please? Yeah, this one. So a piece that I was curious about was the way that we propose this zoning, how would it work if a developer was wanting to combine the lots from 91st through to 92nd? I assume that's possible because we see it elsewhere in the neighborhood. And would there be any sense in us potentially for the northern side of East 91st, where we had been proposing R8A, to propose a higher density in a way that would make it more convenient for combining all the way through that block for a taller building?
Great question.
Yeah.
I think the way it works is that even if a developer wants to combine two lots, they would still have to follow the zoning requirements for each side unless they separately proposed through a ULURP, moving density from one side to the other. I believe that is the way it would have to work. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, you're generally not allowed to cross density to cross district boundaries. So couldn't transfer air rights from a lower zone to a higher zone. That's generally discouraged. So uniformity is something maybe we could consider for this. Definitely something to look at.
Yeah, I'm just curious because especially I was looking on the Google Maps just to see there are tall buildings in this vicinity on the end of the block as you were describing in the context. I think that if there were to be a R10A type building that happened to be in the middle of this block connecting the two sides, we have seen some really nice implementations of that in the neighborhood. And so I at least would be in favor of that if that were possible. But appreciate there are lots of factors to be considering and overall fully support the direction of this proposal. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Barbara Rudder.
Hi. It was an amazing presentation that you both did. It goes over my head, so I may ask a question that's already been answered. But first, Michelle brought up a question for me. So what you originally said, Elizabeth, is if you live on a block that's manufacturing and it's residential now, it's because grandfathered. Does that mean that if that low-rise building is knocked down, even if we don't change the zoning, could that still be residential or not? Would residential be grandfathered?
No.
Or is it only commercial that's grandfathered?
Well, even commercial uses, let me take a step
It's
back.
by uses, I know, like grocery store for grocery store type of
If
thing.
you were to demolish an existing residential building,
Mhm.
whatever would be built could not be residential today.
And that's not grandfathered then. That brought up Michelle's question, brought up my, okay.
The residential uses that are already there can continue to remain.
But if they knock down one of those brownstone, it cannot be replaced with another residential at this.
Correct.
With the zoning, the way it is today. Okay, thank you. That was one question. The other, just a comment, what Sebastian said, the animal shelter, in fact, has gone from the front of it is 92nd Street, the back of it is 91st Street. So that did cross over two streets when it was built. From what I know of those two, I can't picture any other place. There's a hotel on 92nd and other things. So I don't even know if there would be an opportunity to go from 91st, the northern 91st to 92nd. But that is an example of going from 91st to 92nd Street, the animal shelter.
So in that case, what I think what we are seeing today, or the animal shelter, it is on this, the zoning is the same today on the 91st Street side and on the 92nd Street side. Right. And for that reason, there isn't an issue in using in a building that is on both.
Okay.
Or usage on both sides. But currently both sides are zoned the same.
And the third, I thought I didn't hear you talk about the south side of 91st Street. I guess I'm wrong. You did talk about the south side being some development.
We talked about the
Sorry.
south side of 91st Street at the prior meeting.
Okay. Because
And in
would
that
be-
meeting, the discussion was to propose that as R8A.
And what's on the north side would be what? That would be or.
And we have been in this presentation proposing that the north side also be R8A,
Yeah.
so they be the same. And
To
that
me,
only
yeah.
the south side of 92nd Street be R10A because it is facing a very different context.
I heard what Tom said and I understand. I know that street well. But I will tell you the south side in particular is just once you go a little further east, the very beginning is where Sacred Heart has their gym. It's a huge building with Sacred Heart's gym in it. But after that, it is commercial garages, it's catering places, it's old buildings. To me, that's just ripe for some development. A great street right by Asphalt Green. First Avenue is going up. So I see both sides having some potential, but particularly the south side is
Of 92nd.
91st.
91st, okay. Thank you.
Once you get past that Sacred Heart, it is all very factory looking type places. I know there's a few catering places there. Butterfields uses their catering and great big commercial garages that are there.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay.
Dana Sessa.
Hi, how are you? I live on 94th Street. I live in, I think, one of the only within that block, one of the only residential high-rise buildings. And I'm just curious, yeah, if you could back up, you'll see me in the corner of one of those images. Yeah, on the right-hand corner of that right-hand image. No, back one. And I'm curious I would, forgive my naivete, but can we revisit this idea of what is considered a mixed use property for one of these types of buildings? Because I'm envisioning, these very large edifices of multiple residential buildings that are strung together. And I can't think of another residential street within the area, I would say within a 10-block radius, that you would see such large buildings kind of strung together without commercial underneath them, unless you're, let's say, on Park Avenue, which I think it's just a totally different situation. So can we kind of revisit what the idea of I'm thinking about kind of the walkability of the block, and I'm thinking about these kind of very large edifices over the stretch of a very narrow block.
So let me ask a clarifying question. Are you suggesting that you would want ground floor retail, for example, so that
some perhaps. I mean, I think about the walkability. I have 3 kids, and I think about my eldest is 9. She wants to be able to walk to the corner. She wants to be able to walk to a store. And yes, it's helpful to have doormen along the street. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the only way by which we could create an environment for a child to be able to walk down the block. And I'm thinking about kind of, number one, the walkability of the block and kind of being able to kind of move about the block in different ways, and also kind of the circadian rhythm of the block, right? If it's a purely residential block, you won't really have that much street traffic during specific points during large sections of the day and things like that. So yes, I think I don't know exactly what that would look like. I know right now on 94th Street we have a small nail shop, We are a very oddly zoned block, for sure. But yeah, I'm just I can't exactly envision, we're talking about rezoning these huge tracts of the block. And then of course what would pop up there is these high-rise buildings, and then again high-rise buildings without commercial underneath them. It's just hard for me to envision, to be quite honest.
Okay, that's a very useful suggestion.
Yeah. And then my other, I'm coming to my first meeting. I know the bell is already rung on this life science building. I'm actually excited about the life science building, other than the fact that thus far they have not necessarily been a great neighbor. I think someone asked if it's actually an active site. It was active, and now it has been inactive for some period of time. It kind of goes in and out of these fits and starts. I assumed it was part of the permitting process, but based on what someone else said, it very well might be kind of this, I don't know, something else. Yeah, they're not necessarily the best of neighbors. It's not necessarily clean underneath their scaffolding. The scaffolding juts out, so there's no sight lines down the block, again, for kids to be able to walk down the block. So things like that. But so again, it was already addressed that the bell is already rung on this. But I'd hope going forward that they would be better neighbors and better stewards of the block. And that said, the block lots you said are 329 to 337. They're actually phenomenal neighbors, and really take care of their property. So,
but 329,
This group here.
327 is where there's a partial vacate exists on all three of the lots.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you explain what that means, Adam?
I don't know what caused the partial vacate, but when you go to the Department of Buildings and you look up what's on the lots, there's a big red notice that says a partial vacate. And I don't know if that's a result of there's some sort of structural issue that's being cured now. So I need to look more in detail of what exactly is the cause of the partial vacate. But it was something that stuck out to me when I was researching those parcels.
Great. Okay, I think what we'd like to do at the moment, everybody who has raised their hand to speak has now spoken. So we'd like to sort of go back to the beginning and go block by block and just do a straw poll of the people here for their sense of is this proposed zone type appropriate for each block on a block by block basis. And let's go from there. So we'll start with block 1571. And again, this is East 91st Street. It's the northern side of East 91st Street. At our last meeting, we discussed the southern side and discussed an R8A zone for the southern side. We have proposed the same here for the northern side. Again, reminding you this is what's currently on the southern side. And so in R8 zone here, it's just above, with inclusionary housing, it's just above what could be built today as of right. It would come with a height limit of 145 feet, and this is under City of Yes. It's the same in both City of Yes and as at present. And so we'd like to do a straw poll on this. And Adam, if you would explain how to straw poll, we would appreciate it.
Is Will running the straw poll?
I'm sorry, not Adam, Will.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I don't
My
have
apologies.
those capacities.
All right. So for everybody who wants to participate, and you want everybody to participate, not just board members, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so everybody go to your device and you're going to look for the React button. And when you open that up, it should give you a menu of options you can do. What we're going to look for is the green check mark or the red X. So as Adam and Elizabeth are showing you a specific site, talking about a specific proposal, If you are in favor of that, you're going to click the green check mark. And if you're opposed to that, you're going to click the red X. I'll give everybody a quick moment to find those, press them, and then I'm going to actually take everybody's reactions down. And Elizabeth will show us the first one.
And for the
we'll
life of me, I cannot find my green and red buttons. Ah,
Well,
there they are.
I don't know that we need to.
Yeah, you and I
Yeah,
don't need to
two of
vote.
you are fine. I think you're both greens.
Okay, so let me now go
So I
back.
see everybody's seeming to find. Michelle, do you have a question while everybody's doing that?
Yeah, I have a question. In terms of our overall concept here. So if we had our straw poll and had R8, we voted for R8A on the south side of the street. And now we're proposing to have the same on the north side of the street for continuity and context, etc. But I contend that that is creating a canyon. And you're talking about the same street wall. You're not talking about setbacks or requirements for setbacks. You've got the same street wall up and down, two sides of a narrow street. That's of great concern to me if you can picture it in your mind's eye. And I'm saying that the other side of the street, our proposal should be for the R8B, or at least one of our options to vote on. I think that we are creating canyons, and I don't think it will serve us well. And I'm not proposing retail on the side streets, but I want to point out that without retail, they will be dark canyons. So you have a street wall that's continuous through both sides of the street, no commercial, so there's no lighting aside from street lighting, no setbacks that are required. And I think on a side street that would look like a canyon. I won't support that.
So Michelle, I'll just bring back, we already have several blocks on the Upper East Side that are very similar to what we're discussing here. And the first one that I will point you to is East 73rd Street between 2nd and 3rd, where both sides of the street are fully built to under what was R8 at the time, but they're, sort of 14, 15-story apartment buildings on both sides, and it's an absolutely beautiful block. And there are multiple blocks on the Upper East Side where both sides of the street are built with the kinds of apartment buildings that would be allowed under R8A.
So like East 73rd Street, as we've referenced in previous presentations, as an example.
Yeah, I also think East 70th Street between 1st and 2nd comes to mind. Both sides of the block are built up with moderate-sized apartment buildings. And you are entitled to your opinion, but we will happily point you to blocks you should go visit.
All right, it's of concern to me.
Yep. And that's why we want to get a sense of straw poll, and we have not in these groups been 100% unanimous on most things. We have been on some, but nor would we expect 100% unanimity.
So just we have one more hand up, Mort, before we go to the straw poll. Mort, did you have a question?
No, I had a comment. I think that your reference of 73rd Street and that environment, you may find the streets are wider and the setback on the buildings are greater than what they are on 91st Street.
We addressed this in one of the previous meetings, the blocks on 73rd Street. I'd have to pull it up.
I don't, well, certainly the width of the streets should be the same.
Yeah, I think they're all 60-foot streets. Although what's interesting is that 92nd Street is actually a 70-foot street. So it is 10 feet wider than your typical street, side street on the Upper East Side, which are almost all 60 feet.
Right. All right, let's, can we go to the straw poll?
Yeah, you do have two hands up, but I think they're
Oh,
probably
since I've got the presentation
yeah,
up on my screen, I can't actually see what's happening in Zoom, so I have
Very
to.
you have
this
Ed
one
and
off.
Diego who've raised their hands. If you want to do them and then go to the straw poll, is that
Yep.
okay? Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I guess my camera's not working anyway. What I was going to say about 73rd, that block that you referenced, that is right behind our building actually. So I know that block very, very well. Those buildings on 73rd between 2nd and 3rd, I think those are like landmark buildings. They're quite exquisite, and that is really quite an exquisite block. On the Upper East Side, I have to say, what they do there, I can't think off the top of my head what the architecture is. I wish David Halpern was here, so give me some help with that. But anyway, as to 91st, I used to live on 89 between the East End and York, so I'm very familiar with that spot up there and the width on 92 and what the gentleman was referencing with the turnarounds and everything. It does feel narrow. It does feel different on 91 than 73. That's the only comment I'll make, is that it does feel a little, it is different for whatever reason. I'm not out there with a tape measure, but I can just tell you that I have walked that area very much and know it well. Anyway, that's all.
Just for folks' reference, I've pulled up a presentation from February. Over on the right here is 225 East 73rd Street. This is a literally an entire block. Both sides of the block are built up with the same type of building. It has an FAR of about 8.7, which is larger than would be allowed under R8A. And so if anybody wants to get a sense of what that could feel like on both sides of the block, that is a beautiful block to go look at. They are much older buildings. There are many other blocks in here. If you look on the left at 225 East 63rd Street, this is an example of another kind of building also built at a higher density than what R8A represents. And there are many blocks in the East 60s and East 70s that have these kinds of buildings or other similar sized buildings on both sides of the block. So clearly, you know, the era of construction has a lot of impact, and that's not something that we can control for. But we do have examples of side streets in the community board area on the Upper East Side, where both sides of the buildings have residential apartment buildings that are, you know, in the range of the size, a little bit smaller than the size that would be allowed under what we are proposing here, or what we're suggesting. So that gives you some context and some comparison points. Okay.
Diego, and then you have one new hand that just came up, Dina.
I just want to say that R8A, according to what is on the website of the city, does have setbacks. You cannot go over 85 feet to the street, and then you have to go back on narrow streets 15 feet, and then you can go up to 125. So there are setbacks. And I work in a building in Chelsea, just under the Hudson Yards, and it has a similar requirement, so people can also go there and see what is there. And I think it's a very similar zoning to what you want.
Yeah, and I think all the examples we show are not built uniform 145, 140 feet straight. They do set back at a certain height, whether that be 80 feet, 90 feet, or 100 feet. The examples Elizabeth just showed, they do step back. above a certain height. So
Well, no, I appreciate what Diego said, because what he's reading is that under current zoning, you couldn't even build the buildings that we're showing you today because they don't set back early enough.
Correct.
Yeah. Dana?
I just had one more question. Is there any I know there's some newer buildings in the area that have public spaces associated with them. You're usually heavily cemented with, I don't know, chessboards and benches and whatever else. And they're usually on corners. Is there, I know this entire area has quite a scarcity of green space. Is there any way to include in this zoning for public and or green spaces under adjacent to abutting said developments?
So typically when you have buildings that are built with a public space in the base like that, the developers are getting a bonus and they're being allowed to build taller and more dense in exchange for providing that space at ground level. Those things typically don't get created in the zoning itself, but a developer who is looking for some special treatment, whether they are looking to rezone something for even greater density, or some other special change, that can then come out in a negotiation. But it's not something that exists in the creation or the design of what the zone would be. We did have an extensive conversation about the asphalt green block, because that is technically also part of this study and is zoned for manufacturing. And we brought in a representative from the Parks Department, I assume many people here know Tisha Shimamura, who used to be a member of Community Board 8. We basically said, what can we do in this zoning process to ensure that asphalt green remains a recreation space and a largely green space in the community? We were asking about, should it be designated a park? It is not currently designated parkland, and her recommendation was to not touch asphalt green and to not discuss asphalt green in the context of this particular program, that she felt that was our best approach to ensuring that that remained completely as it is.
So should we continue with our polling?
Yeah, I think you may need to put this stuff back up and tell everybody what you're polling, but everybody should be acquainted with their React icon and finding the green check or the red X. And I'm going to clear all the feedback right now because I want him or her, both of them, to describe what it is that you're going to be voting on.
Okay, is everybody seeing the page from the current presentation that says our 8A proposal?
You kind of shrunk in and you
Yeah, I
have,
think you need to go to presentation mode if you can.
Hold on. Is that better?
Perfect.
There you go.
okay, so the green check means you support R8A and the red X means you do not support R8A. Is that correct, Adam and
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Is everyone's votes active, or are these remnants, or are
No,
these...
no, I cleared everything.
You cleared it. Okay, I just
so
want to make sure. Okay.
yeah, I cleared everything. So giving it 2 more seconds for people to find their buttons. We have 2 green checks. And I assume the 2 of you, so 4, and then 9 red X's.
Okay, so I'd like to
Sorry,
Rough
understand.
start.
3,
Yes.
3, so 5 and 10 red. So
So I'd like to hear a little bit from the Reds. What you think would be appropriate here? Or what it is about R8A that you are that you would object is causing you to say no here?
All right, you have two hands that have come up, Michelle and Andrew.
Let's go with Andrew first.
All right, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I would prefer the R8B option, which I would have hoped you would mention as an alternative, because I heard you mention it on prior presentations, because I just think it would be more in keeping of the context of the block. I think that if we have R8B, there are bonuses. R8, R8A, as you indicate, under the current city of yes, would have the same height limit, 145, but that's the momentum of that is only going one way. So you're just introducing a lot more upside to the height. We live on the block, we use the bus, we use the bike lanes. We lose that with even smaller buildings. So it's just kind of throwing a bone to the people who live here.
Right. So if I could just make a quick response to that, is that the reason, and if we could leave the slide up. Oh, actually, Elizabeth, can you go back to that slide? It's a perfect slide. The reason we are seeking to do something that's greater than an R8B is that under the current zoning, you can build a 6.5 FAR community facility development. R8B is only 4.0, and under City of Yes will be 4.8. So what you're saying is that we think that the existing, if we don't rezone it, we're saying that the existing community facility density of 6.5 can be allowed to be developed, but instead we would encourage a smaller residential development. And our efforts thus far have not been to, as Elizabeth mentioned at the outset, has not been to effectively downzone the density, but more to promote alternative uses. So that's the rationale behind our approach to this. Obviously, you disagree, which is we can appreciate, but that's just how we came at this.
All right, you actually have another member of the public who I don't believe spoken, Avis. Avis, you can unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I live at 407 East 91st Street, so I experienced this. I've been experiencing this block for over 20 years, and I just can't see any more, anything higher in density. We have so many trucks all the time. The buses, it's kind of impossible to think about it. And, vis-a-vis the South Side, in which one participant was saying there's so much to do there that could be redeveloped. They're not all just, there is Eli owns that little taxpayer garage. I could see that going. But, Morgan, Manhattan, that's a busy art warehouse. It's not going anywhere. And then there's an apartment building. Then there's a facility for special needs children plus Sacred Heart. So I don't think that this block is on the South Side is as flexible as you might think. And on the North Side, what could really be done? The homeless shelter stuck in the middle there kind of limits what's going on. I think also discussing this without the biggest landlord on the block, Zavar is a little bit difficult, and he's not a bad neighbor at all. And for to cite East 73rd Street, I know that block very well because I have a friend who lives in 225 East 73rd. That is a big building. We are never going to be buildings of that quality on this block. So I think some of these comparisons about what could be are quite specious. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I expressed my concerns earlier. So for me, it's about the canyon feeling and the height and all that. I would be happier with an R8B on that side of the street.
Okay.
Let's go on to the south side of 92nd Street. So this is now looking just slightly further north. This is the block that there are 3 fairly large parcels. One is already a highly developed residential. It's already 124,000 square feet, which is about an 8.5 FAR. So, and then 2 other properties. So you can see this is what exists. And these newer facilities, very unlikely to be redeveloped. The animal hospital, don't know. Self-storage, unlikely, but potential in the future if this were zoned residential. Who knows? It could potentially be converted.
And we also talked about residential zoning in the context of existing self-storage buildings. That was a hypothetical that we entertained.
Hypothetical.
During our last meeting, I believe.
Yeah. Looking opposite and adjacent, there are larger developments. You know, in the case of the NYCHA, obviously with setbacks, or setback from the street, although the building itself is a flat front, and to the east, a very tall building, 32 stories, with a setback at the appropriate, the regulated street wall height. And here we had proposed R10A. Again, just given what is opposite, the space that is potentially there, that we felt this could accommodate, this could support, if one of these mid-block areas were to be redeveloped, it could support the higher height limit, the higher density. And yes, there are also setback requirements in R10A.
Michelle has her hand up. Michelle, did you have a question?
Is that NYCHA mainly on the avenue though?
No.
I'm having trouble picturing it. I'm picturing it on the avenue.
So if you look directly across, you can see that's one of them, one of the 2 buildings on that. So there's multiple parcels, but the southernmost parcel has 2 buildings on it.
Yeah, and what you can see is that you've got a lot of open space on the street front.
Well, that's, by the way, where Fettner contemplated a 50-story development.
Yes, yeah. And then one of the other buildings on that block is set back. The entryway is set back. Right?
Yes, that's the mixed
community
facility.
Yeah.
The elevator, the hotel and community facility building.
That one.
Right, right. So the entry is actually
is set back.
Set back there, yes. And then the building in that left-hand picture, but to the right of the hotel, excuse me, that building is set back after about 5-6 stories, correct?
Right, I believe that's a classic tower-on-base development. And that's a 32-story residential building that's on the corner and is already mapped in the high-density zoning district.
And it got that height because it's on the corner. Is that right?
Yes, it's already in the R10 zoning district.
Yeah, that's right here. Okay, straw poll.
All right. If you are in favor of, sorry, remind everybody what it is.
R10A.
R10A
has a height limit of 235. Under City of Yes, it's 215 currently. And it has a maximum density of a 10 FAR with a bonus of 2 for a total of 12 for inclusionary housing.
So if you're in favor of that, go to your react icon, press the green check mark. If you're opposed to that, you're going to do the same, but except for click the red X. And I meant to say how many people were here previously during that first straw poll, so it's just into the video record. There's currently 19 people, so subtract 1 from me, so it's 18 participants. Michelle, you have a question? It's okay.
Yeah, sorry. And what is on the other side of this street?
NYCHA.
The NYCHA.
So it's all NYCHA on one side of the street. And that's a 25-story. And then this is what's on the other side of the street. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
All right, so last call. Right now we have 5 green checks and 6 red X's, and then 6 green checks and 6 red X's, and then the 2 co-chairs would be 8 green checks total, and now 7, 8, so 8 and 8 of each out of 18 people. So that's probably as many as we're going to get. So very split.
Okay. So I'd again
for comment.
like to ask anybody who, with the red X on this, what zone type do you think would be appropriate here and why?
I'm not seeing any hands come up.
Okay.
You can go to the next one, I guess.
Okay. So now we are at block 1557. This is the north side of 94th Street between 2nd and 1st.
That's right. This is the this is the Taconic life science block.
So it's a block with that will have a life science facility built, most likely, or we'll have something built in the middle there.
Right.
That's currently proposed at 190 feet, or
That's
currently
correct.
planned at 190 feet. Okay, so on this block, we had proposed R10A.
All right, I don't see questions. So if you're in favor of R10A, go to the React icon and you're gonna look for the green check mark if you're in favor of that. And if you're opposed to that, go to the React icon and you're looking for the red X. Don't click anything else. Those won't be counted. Again, we're still at 18 participants in the room and letting people filter in. We have 5 green checks. Then we'll add our 2 co-chairs to make that 7 and 5 red X's. Going once, going twice. 6 green checks, not including our co-chairs. And 7 green checks now. And 5 red X's. So.
Okay.
Okay. And again, an opportunity for anybody who used the red X. Is there a zone type that you feel would be more appropriate?
Dana?
I'll plead naivete. I don't know the zone types well enough to know. And I'm not necessarily averse to large buildings. It comes back up against the exact the thing I was talking about before, kind of the walkability of the block, large edifices, no commercial. Again, I think it would just it's a no, but right. I think it just would need to be a little bit more nuanced of like thinking about commercial space, public spaces, green spaces, and breaking up the block a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting block because when it's all said and done, and when Taconic finishes their project, you're going to have 2 mid-block community facilities / commercial developments of 190 feet and 205 feet, just sitting in the mid-block. So
right.
That's all. Again, that's what guided this approach to this block is that, you know, it's already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Thank you, Dana. Anybody else?
Yeah, one person named
Additional thoughts?
Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if you don't mind identifying yourself.
Hi, Elizabeth Suarez. I live on this block and I'm on 330 on this block. And it's, as I think Adam was saying, it's unfortunate that precedents that we currently have with those have blocked these super high buildings right now. And I guess if we look at I think your approach is probably the right approach, which is let's just go ahead and fill it up. However, I think maybe there's something in the middle. If there's an R8 or something, again, I'm not opposed completely to the idea because again, the fabric would look just the same all across. But unfortunate, as someone else mentioned, the block is pretty bare in green spaces, and it would, I don't know, it would benefit from something that might have to create a setback somehow, and some frontage because it's quite a desert, I would say right now. Like it's pretty bare.
Okay.
And one more thing, I guess I'm not sure yet what's the proposed for the south side because there's such a contrast right now with sort of a line of three words on the south side. But I'll look forward to that.
So the south side, I don't think is the south side, is the south side part of the study?
The south side is, yes, that's what block is it? I cut it off, but yes, it is part of it. That's the C8-4 zoning district.
So was that that would have been in last month's presentation?
Let me get the exact tax lot there. Tax block. No, that's block 1556. No, that's addressed at the end here.
Okay, so let's go to that. Let's go to the south side, and do this one with you with now rather than wait. So this is the south side block. And here we had proposed R8A. So higher on one side of the block, lower on the other side of the block.
And I think that's a function of two things. One, you have some pretty significant commercial developments that are going on the block north of us and on a large parcel. This side of the block has a bunch of smaller parcels and is already mostly built up with residential uses. So it's a different grouping of parcel sizes as well as land uses, south side of 94th versus north side of 94th.
Yep. So here we had proposed R8A. Why don't we get reactions on this?
I'm gonna remove all the reactions right now, so nobody touched it yet. All right. If you are in favor of R8A on this section, you're gonna go to your React icon again. You're gonna press the green check mark. And if you're opposed to it, you're gonna, again, find your React icon and press the red X. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to let folks participate. There's still 18 participants in the meeting right now. And we have 5 green checks and 2 red X's, not counting our co-chairs. 3 red X's. Going once, going twice. All right,
Okay, so again, want to just provide the opportunity for anybody who read Xed, if you wanted to speak to what you think would be a more appropriate zone type.
Elizabeth raised her hand again. Elizabeth?
Hi. I guess I just have a question. Is there any way to sort of group those small buildings so that we don't end up with something where you have almost like teeth and missing teeth? You know, it's like sort of like those, let's say someone develops 3 parcels and there's 2 little buildings left out, or 1 perhaps. Right now there's an empty lot. But is there somehow any way to make sure that that there's a sort of a minimum that has to be grouped in order to make sure all of this makes sense altogether?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think part of what we've discussed previously, and it's definitely something that we're going to have to more fully bake, is the idea of minimum development size, minimum parcel size, so that folks don't do that. And so they can't skirt the MIH, which is what we're trying to encourage. And so they can't build a bunch of, 12,400 square foot developments and get around the MIH requirements. We had definitely talked about encouraging minimum lot sizes or minimum development site sizes for this project. And that would be our way to attack this. Is that fair, Elizabeth?
It would meet both sets of goals.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, so should we go back to 1557? It'll be well, we should go, I guess, to whichever one we did in order. We have to go back a little further back, right? Yeah. Well, we did this. Yeah.
So we did this.
Yeah. So we have to go to the
south
other.
of 92nd.
Yeah, 1557.
So this is the north of 1557, which we just. Oh, we haven't discussed this one yet.
Right.
So this was the north side of 94th Street. Oh, yes, we did. I think we've done them all now.
No, we did the south side we did the southerly portion of this block. Now this is the northerly portion of the same block. And our argument for our 10A was, again, the same argument we had for this, was that there's large developments existing and ongoing on this block. So that was what we were looking for, the northerly portion of this block, which is, again, the southerly side of 95th Street. So not this one. The next one down.
This one.
Here. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Correct.
So south side of 95th Street.
Right.
Lots of small lots.
But we have
high variety today of heights, very wide variety of heights. So this is the gap tooth thing that Elizabeth was just concerned about.
Right.
And here we had proposed R10A.
Right.
All right. Again, if Michelle, you have a question, and then we'll get to the straw poll.
Yeah. What's on the other side of that street? What's it facing?
So facing the north side of 95th Street. Do we have that in here, Adam? We should.
I have the zoning.
It's opposite R8. At least a portion of it is clearly.
That's right. It's opposite R8, yes. Which has no height limit.
And does R8 is what's existing there or we have voted on that? Have we proposed?
R8 is what exists along the north side of 95th Street between first and second.
Oh, that exists there. And
Right.
so for the south side, you're proposing R10A.
Yes.
Okay.
And note that R10A exists on the avenues as well. And then
Yes.
on the north side of 90, of the block north of it. So the block north of this is split R8 and then R10A. So
that's 96th Street,
yeah,
right?
Right, exactly, along 96th Street. So we do have a mix of
But
zones.
that's a much wider street, but
It is a
anyway.
wider street, that's right.
All right, so all the other hands went down. We are down to 17 participants, and we'll go to the straw poll. So green check means you support this. Red X means you do not. In your react icon. And only press it once. Press it a second time, it'll go away. So we are at 5 green checks, and we've had 2, there we go, 2 red X's. That's not including our 2 co-chairs, so 1 hand up from Diego. I've seen your red check, your red X. If that's what you're.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, don't worry. You're my second that I kept seeing it come and go.
Okay, I see green. That's why I don't know what's going on.
No, it's red. You meant green? Is that what you said?
No, I meant
Okay, good.
I meant red.
Right.
Red.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, it was 5 and 2, and then plus our 2 co-chairs.
Okay.
Okay. I think that gets us through all of them.
I think it does.
That is concludes sort of our formal portion of the meeting. Diego, you have your hand up?
Yes. Why is this block 10A and not 8A like the other ones? I mean, we're still on narrow street. There's no park in front. There's nothing.
This was because of the existing buildings that are already on the block, is why we thought R10A was in context with the other buildings. Doesn't mean that R8A could not also be an option to consider, but we had proposed R10A because of the existing buildings that are already on the block. Ed?
Sorry, motion to adjourn.
Let's have Michelle. Let's call on Michelle, and then
I don't
we'll
mind. I don't even need the answer to it, but I'll just throw it out there. How are you really going to evaluate this straw poll when you've got different people at each of the meeting, a different number of people at each of the meeting, a different proportion of both board members and public, and everything switches out at every meeting? So I'm just wondering what in the final analysis, how are you going to,
the next meeting is where we start trying to bring this all together, Michelle.
Yeah, but you'll have.
Are you trying to suggest that this is not an exact science? I mean, I think that might be a little out of bounds.
Yeah, no, I that's why I said I wasn't really asking for an answer, but I was just saying that you may have a person who only attended one of the whole year of meetings, or somebody, you get the point. Just throwing it out there.
Yep.
We get it.
Okay. Ed, would you like to make
I second the motion to adjourn.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Hope
you.
everybody enjoys the rest of the playoffs. And we hope you will come back again next month. We will look